the administration is aware that there are American citizens being held hostage now by Hamas, but we don't know how many, and that the U.S. government is in contact with the Israeli government to try and establish the details there. But wait a second. Hamas, which is funded by Iran, supported by Iran, didn't John Kirby just say that by giving billions of dollars to the Iranians, it wouldn't lead to more Americans being taken hostage? Here he was last month.
I know that you dispute that this is a ransom payment. Obviously, many critics of this agreement say that it is just that. So, in effect, they suggest it's $1 billion per American individual being released. So how is this not incentivizing bad actors and rogue regimes like Iran in the future to detain more Americans?
Bad actors like Iran and like Mr. Putin in Russia don't need any incentive to continue to look for ways to wrongfully detain Americans. It's been happening a long time, and we have to accept the reality that it could happen again in the future.
Well, the future has arrived. It certainly has. Let me bring in Adam Kredo now. He's a senior writer of foreign policy and national security for the Washington Free Beacon and joins us now. Adam, good afternoon to you, sir.
Howdy, how are you?
I'm okay, but we're watching all these headlines, Adam, and I would really appreciate your help trying to contextualize this for us because, you know,
Sure.
we've seen, you know, if any American, around the world, we've constantly seen stories of the conflict in the Middle East, the Arab-Israeli conflict, that there's more missiles coming across the border, more attacks. Contextualize this attack on Israel this weekend for us. How different is this?
It's significantly different. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the headlines like I have following this, that, you know, this is really the worst attack in at least 50 years, certainly decades and decades. And it's not just a new operational sophistication. It also shows the long arm of Iran, which, while it has long been present in funding and directing Hamas, this shows an operational coordination that is kind of unprecedented and also obviously threatens to open up a second front on Israel's northern border with Lebanon, where Hezbollah is in complete control of the government and also funded and directed by the Iranian regime.
Isn't that second front kind of already open, though? I mean, the Hezbollah is firing missiles over the last 24 hours into Israel now, apparently in support of Hamas's efforts. And I was just pointing out moments ago, these are different Islamic sects. You have the Sunnis in the form of Hamas and the Shia in the form of Hezbollah working, according to the Wall Street Journal, the direction of the Iranians on some sort of unified attack on Israel now.
Correct, because the differences in the sects are always surmounted by their hatred for Jews and Israel, so that's no surprise there. And you're right that there has been some chaos on the northern border, but there's certainly fears of a wider war in that Hezbollah tries to send troops over, tries to, like Hamas, also start a ground war with Israel on a second front. And I think the Israelis are very conscious of that. It's also kind of important to note with Iran here, the context of this. Iran also maintains relations with Al-Qaeda. Again, religiously different sects, always assumed by, you know, the analysts and experts to be at odds, but really they're not. Al-Qaeda's top leadership is in Iran, being supported and hosted by them. You have Iranian-controlled militias, part of the government in Iraq, and also the Taliban in Afghanistan expressing support for what Hamas is doing. This is all a unification of these groups to lay siege to the Jewish state.
Tell me about the role that these hostages, these Israeli hostages, play right now. Hamas is claiming that they have over 130 Israelis in the Gaza Strip at the moment. That is absolutely the kind of thing that complicates the military response for Israel. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it does absolutely, especially with the Israeli government's longstanding policy of not leaving hostages in terrorist hands. You, I'm sure, will remember when just one soldier was captured, Israel, you know, made a siege to get him back. Now with hundreds, and not just soldiers, but also civilians, I think that's going to play into the calculus of what Israel decides to do, how it chooses to wage this war, and whether it really like Netanyahu said, goes ahead and launches a full blitz of the Gaza Strip, or is conscious that these hostages are being kept within there, and hopefully their intelligence services can determine where and coordinate an attack that doesn't also endanger them. I
Yes.
mean, it also bears noting, I think, that Hamas is very famous for its use of human shields. Now, that's not just hostages they've abducted, but of course that's playing into the situation now, but their constant use of their own citizens and civilians in highly density areas, highly populated areas, using them as cannon fodder for the Israelis and implanting weapons stores and rocket launchers where regular people live.
Adam, I was just citing a series of events over the last 24 hours. The Israelis have been issuing urgent warnings to civilians in the Gaza Strip that they need to relocate. They need to get out of the area because defensive attacks coming from Israel are going to start flying in, have been. The Hamas and the leadership there in the Gaza Strip has been telling the civilians, ignore the Israeli warnings. That goes right to your point.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And it also highlights something that I think is missed on a lot of Americans who are not geographically familiar with the region, just how close everything is. This is a really, really small piece of the region that we're dealing with here in terms of Israel, the size of the state itself, and also its borders with the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and Lebanon up in the north, that the threat of spillover is something constantly on people's minds, that there are settlements, there are kibbutzim, there are other places in Israel that are really right up against hostile zones in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
And there's threat not just of attacks from Hamas hitting them, which we saw when they launched this surprise assault, but also spillover from whatever Israel chooses to do when it responds.
Adam, we're going to be talking about this more coming up throughout the show with David Harsanyi and Julio Rosas. But, I over time, on any issue, when I hear it be described in black and white terms, I always pause. I'm like, give me more information. I want to know about the two sides of this conflict. But in reality, with Israelis and what's going on with Hamas, the idea that people can get on television and be like, which they are. This is happening on American TV right now. There are people speaking up on behalf of Hamas and saying, oh, they only attacked military targets, or they only took military people hostage. And I'm saying this is obviously a lie. I'm seeing on my camera screen, my phone or computer screen, I'm seeing images of grandmothers being taken hostage, of children. Like, what are they talking about? To me, it's almost like this issue is hard to be any clearer than it is. And yet there's a lot of people who seem to be misled about the details here. Why?
Yeah, the misinformation is happening on multiple fronts, and I can address them for you. On one, you have the pro-Palestinian sympathizers, the people who will say this war is only a response to so-called Israeli occupation, so-called Israeli aggression. But that's not the case. The facts are that Hamas specifically went after citizens, children, women, the elderly, and slaughtered them or took them hostage. It was not focused in any way on just targeting the Israeli military or its positions, although they did also do that. But this is attacked to cause chaos. You see the term militant group bandied about rather than terrorist group. In fact, there are publications that mandate the use militant of the word militant instead of terror group because they think that has an implication. The media is complicit in the spin because of that, in the way that they choose to use their language. This is a terror group that tries to kill women and children, not a militant group that is taking on an oppressive army. That's the first thing. The spin is also happening on the end of the political players in this. By that I mean the Biden administration saying the $6 billion ransom payment for Iran played absolutely no role in bolstering Hamas and helping Iran organize this attack with Hamas. The White House is also claiming that its resumption on day one of aid for the Palestinian government, including areas controlled by Hamas, that has no impact on this because U.S. aid did not go to Hamas. In fact, that's also a lie. 2 months ago, I published internal State Department documents where they expressed a very real and concrete fear that U.S. assistance would indirectly benefit Hamas. That was written into these emails when they asked for sanctions waivers so they could restart this funding. So the spin and the media war against Israel and against the Biden administration's role in fostering this is really playing out on a bunch of different levels.
So we fund the Iranians, we fund Hamas, we have depleted our own. There's ammunition in the region that has actually gone away to go to the Ukraine conflict. The United States was taking ammunition that was dedicated to protect Israel and sending it to Ukraine. So that went down. And now we also have reports that weapons from Afghanistan left behind by the Biden administration to the tune of some $7.1 billion at least are now apparently in the hands of Hamas being used against Israeli civilians.
Right, of course, not surprising at all. I mean, one, the Taliban has already said that they support Hamas's actions, and two, what did we really expect the Taliban would do with the billions of dollars worth of equipment? They weren't going to donate it to, what we would see as a good cause. They're not sending it to Ukraine. Naturally, they're sending it to all of their terrorist allies. So I think, again, these are all pieces of a puzzle in terms of the Biden administration's diplomatic efforts with Iran and its foreign policy priorities in the Middle East. All of this is coming to bear in kind of the culmination with Hamas's attack.
Yes.
Its support from all of these places that we helped terror groups resurge in, and our diplomacy with Tehran that enabled them to get a hold of quite a bit of money.
What does this mean for Israel internally? I know there's been a lot of, over time, there certainly has been a lot of political factions warring with each other in conventional terms, not like, actually at war, but in political terms, just going after each other. Will this have the effect of unifying the Israeli people, and how firm is their resolve? Where do they take this next in response?
I mean, historically, in the short term, there will be unity. Israel is no stranger to these kinds of attacks, even though this one is certainly the worst in recent memory, if not longer. But in the short term, you will see unity. The Israelis are known to come together despite their, political warring and all of the disagreement in the country in times of war. They've demonstrated that repeatedly over the years, and I don't expect anything different. One thing that I think will be new is the piece of the intelligence failure here, not just on their side, but also with their allies, that is the U.S. Why did we not see this coming? Why did our intelligence services, their intelligence services, really not seem to expect this brewing? In fact, thinking that the region was, kind of in a state of peace. I think that's something in the long term you're going to see the Israeli government really grappling with.
Yeah, a lot more questions left to be answered, and unfortunately, a lot more chaos ahead, it seems. Adam Kredo, thank you very much for your assessment today, as always. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.